Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Kevin Coyne from Tech Ranch, and here to share with you today's Venture Outfitter. We have a bunch of things to say. Just got a really great update from one of our entrepreneurs in Lagos, Nigeria, about what he's doing with vaccinations. We'll tell you more about that. We're going to get him and a handful of other people that are doing work in pandemics to come back. So, Emmanuel, really excited to have you here today. Um, we're in the Venture Outfitter. Our whole work here is to support the entrepreneurs that are making the world a better place. We have a special program today. DualWorks is our partner in offices here in Austin. We have several different partnerships, but we actually hang our own hat here at DualWorks. If you're looking for a space, let us know. You can go to that URL that's on this website, on this page, and you can get specific information about what's possible for Tech Ranch offers and stuff like that. If you're here for the first time, one of the things that I've been wanting to make sure I say is a lot of times we do have, obviously Tech Ranch is a business and has multiple levels, but I want to keep on emphasizing before we start talking about all the paid programs, the thing that's happening right now that I want to make sure you know about is get involved in the community. There's been a really big uptick in the Slack activity in the community. We're going to see some of the results of that today with today's program about in ed tech, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But make sure that you're on the Slack community and get involved and come to these things and then direct what you'd like to see in coming VO weeklies. And VO stands for Venture Outfitter. The whole idea here is this is a program from the Tech Ranch to help you outfit your venture and then bring the community together around supporting whatever you're up to in the world, because through this group of entrepreneurs that are working together, we can actually move mountains together. The coming soon, we have several different things. There's going to be a bunch of different things happening around mental health startups. Those of you all that know that I started the mental health special interest group as part of the Texas Global Health Security Initiative. That's what this thing on the left is. We do have all the pitches that we're going to actually show off on March 14th, but we want to continue to collect other mental health startups just because we now have a $1 billion foundation over here and a couple of universities over here, both in and out at the U.S. And there's a mental health subgroup inside of Tech Ranch. If you know something about that, if you have something to offer, please hop in. One of the partners in that work is the Texas Suicide Prevention group. It's a group run by a woman by the name of Lisa Sullivan, and we're helping cross-promote her symposium, which is March 1st through the 3rd. Information and the details are on techranch.com/events. Global Health Security Week, Innovation Week is March 12th to the 15th, concurrent to South by Southwest. You can join that for free. It's all virtual. This will be integrated in with South by Southwest, but it's completely virtual. Take advantage of that. And March 15th, March 14th is the pitch day. And I know some of y'all are pitching as part of the pitches that we put together. March 15th is it's called the Recover Day. It's like the mental health, brain health section of that. And we have some internationally known level speakers for that, so join us. Now, that being said, the Global Health Security Innovation Week is not just about mental health. It just happens to be that's the part of that group that I'm chairing. And we have University of Texas, Texas State University, a lot of different universities behind that. But do take advantage of that. On the 12th of May, we will have the Texas EU Business Summit, and we're going to have a special program going over some of the bridges that Tech Ranch has been doing. That's at UT. And can be another valuable thing to participate. There will be a virtual component on that as well, so take advantage of it if you'd like. And then I will be speaking about the global supply chain crisis implications for startups as part of South by Southwest. This should say South by Southwest. This is so if you're physically here in Austin for South by, we will actually be talking about that in depth. And so all this information you can find in the details. Instead of sending me an email, check the Tech Ranch events calendar. We'll continue to start really I've asked my team and the community to really start a push on that. Now, the rules about this is if there's some association with what's happening with Tech Ranch and Tech Ranch members, we will promote that on our events calendar. Things that are not Tech Ranch or Tech Ranch entrepreneur affiliated are not really appropriate on that, and so sometimes I get a lot of really random stuff. It's got to be driving impact, innovation, change in the world, and something that that somehow our entrepreneurs are tied to. So, one really important thing, Dr. Paul Farmer is one of my heroes in this type of work about using technology and changing the world for the better. And he passed away this last week. And he created healthcare. He said that healthcare is a human right. And he brought a model of healthcare to a lot of different locations. But he came up with a low income type of process that I think is really interesting. If you haven't seen it, we will make sure that links about a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains is available to you. It's interesting to read. It's one of the ones that, for me, especially early on in the whole process of this work on building Tech Ranch, I was like, hey, I want to do what Paul Farmer's doing, but for entrepreneurs. And there's also a film about him that we'll make sure that it's called Bending the Arc. We'll make sure in the show notes for today, and then I'll get someone to, or I'll get Jello to do a cross post about the details about that into the Slack channels. But if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration, Dr. Farmer's background is quite inspiring because he really showed that you can bring healthcare to places that haven't had it before. And so definitely honoring his name and his memory. And he died way, 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 way too young. He died at 62. I don't know the details of that, but he died in his sleep just this last week. And so that sucks because we need more people like Dr. Farmer to really change the world for the better. So that just means that all y'all people out there have more work to do to fill in the space that he left. I also want to say something about why Tech Ranch exists. There's this quote from William Schurz, and I never know how to say that last name, but he said, "Borders frequented by trade are seldom frequently by soldiers." And everyone probably already knows that there has been an incident concerning the country of Ukraine. We have entrepreneurs in Ukraine. We actually have entrepreneurs in Russia that we worked with. And I for one, am vehemently against authoritarian governments, whether they show up in the United States or Russia or China or anywhere else in the world. And I think what's happening right now is unacceptable. And so there is going to be an official party line from Tech Ranch. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm looking for ideas about how to materially support the resistance of authoritarianism in Ukraine. And we'll set up what will probably be a closed channel inside of the Slack channel to organize around this. The minister of my church happens to be a former Russian rock star, and he's half Ukrainian and half Russian. And so, and he's really, really upset as well about what's happening because, it's not something that, this is the biggest war already since World War II. And I think that part of the implication of why we should take this serious is I'm willing to bet that at the same time we're going to see activities between China and Taiwan, more authoritarianism, moving tanks and crap like that. And I just want to remind you, we want to have trade, not weapons. And bigger things are at risk than I think most Americans kind of understand because we're so blanketed here. So with that, I just want to make sure that there's been quite a lot of conflicts. These are the conflicts that have been reported. They're being underreported in the U.S., I think. But I got this from the gentleman I just mentioned earlier about some of the different places, all the different places that there have been confirmed confirmed hits. So this is not some isolated. Putin actually said that there's like an isolated kind of thing. No, this is pretty clear that there's been enough attacks that this is a major invasion. And so if you have ideas, anybody that hears my voice, if you have ideas about what we should be doing, you can contact me via whatever means necessary. I do have Signal on my phone, so you can use Signal if you want to use the most secure way that we know how to communicate. That is great. And for our friends and partners in Ukraine, including former employee that was Ukrainian of Tech Ranch and stuff like that, we're here to support you in any way that we can, and keep the ideas rolling about what that might look like. And as one of the person said, say your prayers and let's leave it in God's hands, but let's take action around this as well. So that all being said, the reason we're here today, we'll probably have a subsequent statement in time where I would love to actually have a work session where we just say, okay, what can we possibly do as a network of entrepreneurs? So be thinking about that. Mm-hmm. That being said, today is about the state of education for the workforce ecosystem with Dr. Holly Custard, or I don't know if she goes by doctor, but she certainly has a PhD. She's shaking her head. She's got a really interesting background, but what I want to do is I want to introduce Stephen Galbraith, who is the founder and CEO of one of our startups named Tara Learning, or Tara Classroom, who is actually the EdTech community leader of that section of the Tech Ranch group. And he's leading a bunch of different startups. Stephen, take it from here, introduce Holly, and I'll get out of the way.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. So we hope to bring more of these series to the EdTech channel with Tech Ranch. So today we're actually delighted to have a special guest, Holly Custard, here with us. And let's go over her background a little bit for introduction. So Holly is the Senior Director of Impact Partnerships at the Strada Education Network, where she engages with stakeholders to raise awareness and inspire action through Strada's research, their philanthropy, investments, and collaborative partners. Her work focuses on fostering social change through the development of an interconnected ecosystem that supports robust and meaningful learning. And that leads to purposeful employment with a living wage. She has worked across nonprofit, public, and corporate sectors throughout K through 20 education for more than 20 years. Before joining Strada, she had a team of academic strategists as head of academics at Pearson, driving innovation in online program and learning experience design for higher education. She's also served as Associate Director of Digital Content at the University of Texas at Austin, as a Product and Solution Specialist at Pearson, and as Education Program Director for PBS. So we want to thank you for being here today, Holly, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yep. So can we start? What brought you into this line of work? What brought you into this passion of work?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. When people, I think, look maybe at my path, it's not clear, like the underlying thread that holds it together. So, starting from a really young age, I was interested in human rights. I did a lot of work with Amnesty International starting in like 7th grade, so really spending a lot of time thinking about human rights and equity, thinking about culture, communication. Those kinds of things have always been really important to me and really intriguing to me. And so, that kind of started at a young age, and my undergrad was focused on international relations. And I'd always thought that, I would do work in that field, but what ended up happening was, I started thinking about what I wanted to do for work when I graduated. And my first thought was, oh my God, I don't have any skills. Like my 2 weeks before graduation, I'm like, oh, Mom, I'm graduating and I don't have any skills. Like, how am I going to get a job? I can't be a nurse. I don't have, what do I do? I don't even know what to do. It was this moment of really like realizing that I had no I had no one helping coach me into my path. So I had to feel my way through it. I think like the majority of people, typically do. And for me, it was at that time in my life saying, well, what has impacted me the most? How can I make the biggest change in the world around me? And media had always been an important component of my life. That's what really drew me to human rights. It's what drew me to intercultural communications, based on really good teachers who opened my eyes to the world through media. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get a job at PBS because this is an organization I really believe in. And I grew up with it. And it really, a lot of the things that I had learned in school came from media through PBS, right? So I hounded the folks at the PBS station in San Antonio at the time to hire me and give me a shot, never having really worked outside of, working at the video store in college and working at a gas station. Like, how do you get your first job? So I convinced them to hire me. This will all make sense in a minute. And I won't go for much longer and bore you to death. But the point is, like, media really became the conduit for me of how we reach people, how we think about the world in different ways. And it drew me, this combination of education and media and equity have been kind of the three forces driving my entire career. So I went from, public television, I went through 4 different degree programs alongside working. Kind of just the two things in tandem for me have always, they drive each other. My professional work, my intellectual work, and my advocacy work are all very interconnected. So it's always been, how do we take education and technology to drive equity and social change? And so I've been just trying to investigate that. Like, okay, PBS, nonprofits moving to a big corporation, giant education publisher, to working at a single university. And now at Strada, which is a very unique organization. But that's what's driving, that's what's gotten me here. And that really is what drives my work.
So it's that connection between media, which is how you started, to how does that apply to education, and how can the two blend together?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just media and technology are so powerful. And how can we use this to drive social change? And there's so many different ways to look at this. And of course, we're going to talk a lot probably today about the education to workforce landscape, which is where a lot of my work is happening right now, and how I'm driving all of this background into the work I'm doing. But you can really see it's limitless how education and media and technology can drive social change in so many different formal and informal ways. But I'm focused now on education and workforce, so we can talk about that in detail later.
I mean, and you bring up, like, after college, right, you were looking to get hired somewhere too, and you were wondering, hey, what kind of skills to use? So, and that kind of leads to the work that you're doing now, right? And it's not uncommon for people to be done with school and say, okay, what do I do now? And do I have that skill set? So part of what you're doing now too is about bringing that skill set to people who are entering the workforce as well. Super important. What do you think has been some obstacles to that too, where because like at Tech Ranch, we're big on requests, right? So in the Slack channel, we have a request section where any entrepreneurs or people in the workforce want to make requests to us too. So what are some obstacles you think too that maybe the community could help you with?
Interesting. Well, there's so many, to give a little context maybe first, before I can answer that question, I'll just talk a little bit about the work I'm doing now, and the obstacles I think facing the ecosystem, which there are so many problems to be solved, which is what makes it exciting and daunting at the same time. So I'll ground what I'm going to say. When I first started at Strada, I was hired at the Institute for the Future of Work. And for the first year, I did a lot of qualitative research. So I talked to over 100 people across the country, adult learners over the age of 25, actually, who were underemployed or unemployed, not earning a living wage without college. And it was incredibly powerful hearing people tell their own stories and explaining what their visions were when they were at a young age in high school, what happened throughout their life, where they are now, and everybody wants to make a change. Everybody wants to grow and be a better self, or make promises, fulfill promises that were made to parents or children, or be an example to your children. Everybody is motivated to do more and to do better. But many, many people are just stuck in this kind of constant state of transition, not knowing what is possible in the labor market, what jobs are in demand that are going to pay me a living wage so that I can take care of myself and my family. What skills do I have? What am I interested in? Like, who am I, right? Like, these are big questions everybody's grappling with. Over 40 million people before the pandemic were in this situation. And when you look at, if you don't have a clear understanding of self, and you don't have a clear understanding of the labor market opportunities and the delta of skills that you need to get where you might want to go. I mean, there is no system that exists right now to help anyone outside of K-12 or in a higher ed institution, maybe workforce boards, depending on where your people are going for help. There's no system that helps an individual navigate all of this. And so a lot of the work, what we were trying to do is take the research insights that we had gained with our research team to think about if we were going to create a new ecosystem that helped create seamless navigation between learning and work. And we made it for the most vulnerable populations in the US, which was this population at the time we were thinking about. Then the system would work for everyone. And so in order to build the ecosystem, we're going to have lots of different stakeholders present. It can't just be formal education providers. It can't just be the employers. It has to be entrepreneurs, and there have to be private and public partnerships to pull this off, because our existing institutions are strapped. How are we going to think about this problem differently? So when I think about the biggest in this space and in this context, I think the biggest barriers that we face as a country is just the continued siloed nature of how we do or don't work together. I think people have organizations and individuals, we have very siloed ways of thinking about things. We compartmentalize the role of education and how it looks and feels and works for everyone. We have the same conceptualization about work, and whether or if you're in an institution of higher education, there are silos. There are silos in every organization. So how do we break down the silos by being transparent and being accountable for collective action? And I think that's really important for I would imagine that that's true for a lot of different work that everybody here is interested in solving for.
I can break down silos.
Silos, they're not our friend.
I was talking to my business partner the other day too, and he's working at one of the schools. They're doing, it's 4 classrooms, this is a high school, it's 4 classrooms, and each classroom has a different subject in it. And the students are rotating throughout that. And it's blended learning. So you might be, let's say you're learning about US history, and you actually coordinate that with your science learning, and it's all blended together. So you're learning like different topics, but through similar people working together through collaboration. That was very unique. I'd never seen that before.
That's brilliant. I mean, I think that's one of the things, there's so many different directions we could go. So I want this conversation to match what y'all are interested in thinking about and talking about, because I look at this state that we're in right now has, I think, opened up an opportunity to have different kinds of conversations about education, like you say. This interdisciplinary work is so critical for solving our most challenging problems. And we've siloed our classrooms traditionally to be learn this and then learn this. But to be full humans and to tackle the challenges and the complexity, you have to learn how to integrate how all of these things come together to make. So it's caused, I think, people are looking at online learning differently. I've been doing online learning since the internet first came around. And I'll tell you, when we were first talking about learning is possible online, there's still a lot of people who don't believe that's true. But at the time, it was unheard of, right? You could talk about how online learning has changed education, and you can talk about learning experience design and how personalized learning is evolving. There's so many things here. When you start talking about an individual person and the skill sets that they have acquired through their families, through their upbringing, through their work, everybody has a unique skills cluster or a set of things that we bring to the table. And how we usually talk about them in a resume is very static and like routine, and same with job descriptions, very kind of
Sure.
static and routine. And, you know, some of the work that we had done at Strada, we were looking at these skills clusters and job demands. So if you look at like a project manager job in Austin, it's going to look really different than the same kind of needs and skills that people need in project management in another city because of the industry culture and community, so instead of just having a similar, I guess, framework for how we think about what a job is or what skills somebody has to know and be able to do to fulfill that job, we really need to start pulling back from how we've looked at it in the past.
Yep.
And start becoming more human, more human centered, and get our systems to allow a little bit more flexibility in how we learn and why we learn and where we learn and how we apply that learning. So
that's important, how we apply it, right? It's how, I mean, there's so much information out there too. Sometimes it's just information overload. So it's how do you actually interpret the information that's there too and put it to good use? And whether that's through collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, anything that's working together as a team sometimes can help actually with that application. Yeah, very true. Very true. There is I remember someone told me this, it's, the education system today, because people are born creative geniuses, but we educate that out of them through the current system. And I thought that was very profound, because a lot of times we think it's one size fits all, and we try to, just get people to graduate or teach towards the lesson versus understanding how someone learns and how they can apply that learning. Because you might have someone who's who's a kinesthetic. Let's figure out how to apply the lesson for that kinesthetic learner versus this one who might be auditory. Let's gear our lessons toward that person that works that way and it's best for them. So I really agree. It's kind of understanding how people process, learn, apply, and then gearing work towards that those traits.
Yeah, I mean, each individual really, everybody has, I think, similar needs in terms of the kinds of, I think one of the biggest strengths of education is the relationship with a teacher or a professor. I mean, I know I can look back to the key people in my life that helped get me where I am mentally and in my career. They're almost all teachers or professors who made me think about the world in a different way. Or it's the human connection that did that. It's somebody willing to talk to you and listen to you and share knowledge and challenge your thinking and a good dialogue, like these kinds of core things that are essential to growth mindset and all of these things. And I think what we're struggling with is how do we take those human elements that everybody needs to grow and that human connection, how do we scale human connection? I mean, this is when you think about, employers are struggling right now thinking, okay, if we want to create, if we don't use the degree as a proxy for readiness for a job, and we want to use skills instead to find the right match, how are we going to do that? If you think about it, it takes a lot to get to know somebody. And is there really going to be, right now we've got algorithms that are screening people out because of degree, which is a big problem. It's causing even a greater, we already have a lot of, structural inequities in how our systems work. And this is a really big one because that automatic filtering of people who would probably be qualified, but don't have the degree, don't even get considered or interviewed for a job. So getting rid of those old systems and thinking creatively about how we open the aperture for new kinds of talent, different ways of figuring out what good talent might look like, it opens up. And this is where I think we have a big opportunity as entrepreneurs and problem solvers to think about how do we scale human touch, and how do we create the right ingredients of tech infrastructure to scale certain things. And then how do we influence community and connectivity in a really meaningful way? And how do we do that for employers? It's going to look different than how we do it for educators. It's going to look different from community-based organizations. But this is a really big issue that this country is grappling with right now, is skills-based hiring. Is it important? Is it good? How will our systems have to change and adapt to accommodate this change? And there's just so much opportunity here for innovation, and it's just calling for it, because our existing institutions are strapped for cash, strapped for the ability to be creative and working outside of kind of the boxes that they're having to work within. So I think bringing in new ideas and new ways of working together is essential to making change in any kind of
Let me ask,
way.
I want to ask about that. Where do you see what's evidence that that change is happening? Like what's you're definitely, you're not just scanning. You probably know specifically of specific examples that where they're taking hold, these new models.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of coalitions and groups. So this is not going to be exhaustive, because there's a lot of people who are carrying.
Just one example or two to kind of give a flavor of where it's integrating in.
Well, one example, there's an organization, another foundation, Markle Foundation. They have an organization that they operate called Skillful, and they have created a Rework America Alliance, and they have pulled together all types of organizations, employers and large corporations, community-based organizations like Goodwill. They have, if you go to their site, you'll see all of the organizations that are there, and they have been holding so many different opportunities to dialogue with each other around what's the role of coaching in a skills-based, equitable, focused hiring system. What do we need to be thinking about? How do we train people who are either formally recognized as a coach, or maybe it's informal? You're a grandma who's helping a bunch of kids in a neighborhood. It's informal, it's formal. There's a lot of people who need access to good information, and they need to know how to talk about this and how to support people navigating, right? That's one conversation around coaching, creating communities of practice for coaches. And that includes, it includes all that, it's breaking down the silos. This is what I love so much. It's like having these dialogues. That's one example. And they work with employers, and they're having these conversations. They work with education providers. You're having these conversations, coaches, and policymakers, right? So they're actively involved in all of these areas. Another organization is Jobs for the Future. Very interesting organization. Again, looking at formerly incarcerated folks, justice involved individuals. Like, they're looking at individual populations and saying, how can we rework our systems to be more equitable and to create open opportunities for people who want to change and grow in their lives, but the systems hold them back? Like, how can we change that collectively? So, JFF does really interesting work where they actually have an accelerator, a kind of an incubator lab, where they're coming up with ideas with all kinds of internal and external partners. And again, looking at all the different stakeholders who are involved here, trying to drive change. I mean, all the way down to Goodwill. I mentioned them because their work is so fascinating. They're a national organization with, stores and affiliates all across the country. And they're using labor market data. They're aggregating that down all the way to a location to say, here's the skills that employers in your region are demanding. Go make programming for people who need to finish their high school diploma or get maybe some digital, basic adult basic education or some digital foundational skills that will then help them get to the next level of maybe an entry-level certificate that would get them into a job that could pay a living wage, and then guide them to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because learning should be lifelong, and our opportunities to engage in learning should always be purposeful to whatever somebody is needing and wanting in their life. So how do we do that if not talking to all of these different stakeholders? So it's just a couple of examples. I mean, Strada has been doing work in this area for a very long time, like looking at how do we create better infrastructures within our 2- and 4-year institutions to drive stronger equity for folks that are often kept out of the good jobs even after graduation? Like, how do we change the way 2- and 4-year institutions work with employers? And how do we ensure that first-generation students are actually getting the social capital and the engagement with employers that other students have that are putting them further ahead? So, I mean, there's so many levels to look at this, Kevin, right? But I think the main thing is what I'm most interested in are those organizations that are finding ways to break down silos and to get on the same page in terms of what is a North Star that we could all share in common, so that we can be transparent about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we hope to achieve, and what it's going to take to work together differently than we have in the past, which means you got to be a little bit vulnerable. You have to be willing to take risks, and you have to be willing to be accountable to things. If it doesn't work, then we've got to be iterative in our approach to how we make this happen. We can't do things the way we used to. Here's a grant. We'll talk to you, at these quarterly reports or at the end, and we're going to see how you did. Is there another way that maybe we could be more iterative, where as a collective, we're shooting for this, we're measuring as we go. And if something's not working, let's iterate and make a change in real time and see what that does for us by keeping the people we're serving kind of at the center of it the whole time.
It seems like connecting the resources together would be able to assist with that too. So you talk about, and just like you're saying, breaking down the silos, it's how do we connect the resources so that we can make sure that we're doing something that's different before too, but still being effective as well. And I liked what you said about lifelong learners, right? And bringing that back to, you had mentioned you had a few teachers that were impactful, and they probably had something to do with you knowing that it's important to be a lifelong learner. Would agree with that. Yep.
And being a critical thinker, not being afraid to admit you don't know something. And when you if you are challenged with your thinking, that's a good thing. It's okay.
Have you seen like internships be effective with, when you're connecting the companies with the schools?
Yeah, there's a big push. I mean, there's a big move right now as part of this kind of national movement in terms of getting, and in fact, there was an announcement on apprenticeships, trying to get more apprenticeships available for more people with more employers. One of the challenges that we're seeing now with especially adult learners, but even traditional, 18 to 24-year-old students, it's really hard for people to go to school full time and not be working. You often have to choose, you either go to work or you go to college, and like figuring out ways to make it tenable. I mean, there's so many students working 3 and 4 jobs that aren't sleeping and trying to, have kids. Like it's, the system's not very flexible, but people have to work to feed their families. And so like figuring out their earn and learn like programs are, different organizations. Skill Up Coalition is a great organization that's trying to work with employers and connect short-term credentials to employers through earn and learn programs. So an example of that is, somebody could get an entry-level position at Lowe's, for example, but Lowe's will pay them to get training as an HVAC technician, which pays better and provides you mobility. And then you don't have to stop there. You can continue learning and growing. Anyway, that's one example of an earn and learn kind of program with short-term certificates. There's lots of work happening now. There's a coalition of over 150 people now called Credential As You Go, out of SUNY and George Washington University. They've got a bunch of folks coming together saying, can we create stackable or incremental credentials so that instead of a person having to go and jump all into a degree without working, are there new models that we could come up with that allow people to maybe take, and it doesn't even, it's so hard because we think about classes and we think about programs and then we think about degrees, but if you unbundle all of those things and you think about how the skills and the content relate to a given job, it kind of frees you to start thinking, wow, how could we create stackability in incremental learning so that people can work and learn and take everything that they are as a full human being, pull that together to do a job. Like, what does that look like? This challenges the way our systems are currently operating from a financial standpoint, from a, transcripting. And I mean, just think of all of the things that have to shift when you take away the credit hour, credit versus non-credit, that impacts the bottom line of universities who need that to pay their faculty and all of their expenses, so it's like none of it is easy. And everybody recognizes that we have to make changes.
One of the things I know we have some educators in the audience as well. One of them has his hand raised. If I could just throw it out there to Melvin, you had a question for Holly as well.
Yeah, Holly, Stephen, thank y'all for what's going on today. I just absolutely love this. I'd like to connect with you on the Inter-American Education Consortium, the nonprofit with Tech Ranch, so we can further things with that, Holly. And Stephen, I love what you said about we bring in these creatives, geniuses, and then we work it out of them through the education system. And I don't know that this is a question, but just a real world example. I went in the education system, and if you're familiar with Texas, Friday Night Lights, and so I wasn't athletic, and so I was marginalized, and I was a non-completer. I walked away in the beginning of my 11th grade year, and I'm not a wimp. You know, I spent 23 years in the Marine Corps, so you know, I just think about that as a real world example of just squeezing that out of our people. So
Yep.
Thank you for bringing that up, Stephen.
Yep. Thanks for sharing.
Looked like Janet might have a question as well. Janet, did you have a question?
Well, no, I just wanted
One
to
of the
comment.
resident educators in the community at school.
Just wanted to comment on what you said, Holly, about an important teacher in one's life. And that is truly what has made the most impact on me.
Mhm.
Are the teachers who really noticed me and, you know, noticed what I needed and worked with me. And that, you know, so I try to keep that in mind as a teacher as well. And you can't reach everybody at the level you'd like, but you reach who's ready and willing to, you know, and eager to be reached out to. So yeah, it's very powerful stuff, the teachers.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, and when I think about a lot of the conversations that I had with folks, one of the biggest barriers to making a change was their own confidence level in themselves,
Exactly.
or, you know, really lacking self-confidence, like, well, I failed, I tried education, I'm not smart, or I flunked because of XYZ, or I thought I was going to be so much better in terms of like socioeconomic status than I am now. Like, I'm so embarrassed, like so
Yep.
much accumulated shame. And you know, and it's really interesting because in several of these conversations, just by anecdotally, in conversations by asking questions and probing and listening, just the simple act of that would change the trajectory of some of the people that I talked to. And in subsequent conversations, like, you know, you really got me thinking about this when you asked me that. And now I'm checking out like these like college completion programs. I didn't even think it was possible. Like, so it's that human connection. It's like, how do we, we have to care, you know, about each other. And we have to listen, and we have to ask questions. I think, Janet, that's what, like, you're getting at the core of humanity. And unfortunately, most people don't have access to it. And so you're stuck in this bubble of isolation. And so how do we reach people? You know, what are new coaching models? What are more like, you know, we have beautiful apps like Headspace and Noom and all of these really cool direct to consumer platforms that are trying to help people, individual people, make some kind of facilitated progress. Like, I'm super intrigued by those things. And like, how can we take that deliberate instructional design of support for people and make that kind of human connection that we're thinking about with teachers? You know, it's that essence of care or contact or communication. How do you link that up with formal learning of technical skills that you need to learn? And how do you put that on a pathway to help keep people motivated? You know, I just think there's so much that needs to be done there to convince over 40 million people that they're worth it, that they have what they need. They just need a little support. They need to find their path. How do we engage with folks who don't trust our institutions, have had bad experiences with our institutions, and can't make progress? we have to do something about this. Like, and I think it's a technical and a human solution that has to come to fore. You know, there's got to be direct to consumer apps that can reach people. There have to be communications campaigns that engage people. And then we have to create that sticky infrastructure, that data interoperability in the back end to tie our institutions together to help. And Mar mentioned the health, you know, the healthcare, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's so similar. And I've heard one of the references that I love that skillful folks have talked about, creating a community of care or continuity of care, which we've been trying to do in healthcare, right? By creating systems that talk to each other and your records are like private, but shared amongst institutions to make it easier for people. I mean, maybe, and that's mostly, I know we're doing that, but it could be better. But the idea is like, could we create digital wallets for all of us? So that all of us on this call could have a digital wallet that allows us to capture what we know and can do and what we've learned through all of our experiences. And then we can communicate that to employers or education providers or each other as we wish to help map progress in our lives. It's interesting.
We're not capturing any metrics for how scared people are or how embarrassed people are.
No, there's so much shame around, right? Like, and mental health, I'll tell you.
Well, there's nothing measured there. There's nothing asked, and a lot of other things can kind of float and take up that space and have different answers because there's no questions being asked in those spaces. Which completely distorts a lot of data that we think that we know.
I think you're right.
Yep.
Let me pose one more question then for the entrepreneurs. So, because you've definitely opened up a lot of different areas, and I like this vision about what you're saying, like what Omar said in the chat, and you said, that education is this value chain, healthcare is this value chain. How, as entrepreneurs, do we take on those institutions? How do we, do we just build something new? Do we actually somehow invade? How do we do that? Holly,
I haven't seen, but I'll let others answer.
No. You're the start of the show because Chief Innovation Officer at Pearson, Chief Academic Officer at Pearson. I don't think anyone else on the program has 4 degrees like you do. Not to take away from anyone else that might have 4 degrees, but I'd really like to hear what do you think first and foremost?
Well, I think it's really hard. I think there's a lot of great institutions out there who are self-disrupting, that are trying to find ways to change, but it's very hard to do it quickly and to do it wholesale. So I think it's a comment. This is not a great clear answer, as most things are not, but I will say that there has to be disruption outside and disruption inside, and they have to come together. This is why I say, I really do believe that public and private partnerships around solving these challenges are so critical, but we have to have intention, if we don't look at the whole picture of what people need to be successful and knit these solutions together in a way that's meaningful for a person, then you can have solutions that are band-aids to different problems in education, and they might do great things for certain people, which is wonderful. We need all of it. But if we're talking about scalable change, we have to have a systemic perspective of how can we come together in new ways to drive change. And that's what gives me hope about this push towards kind of data interoperability and technical integration. Because if we can look at it that way, then you could look at a learner journey, for example, and you could say, okay, the very first marketing message a person gets of, you can change your life, believe in yourself, whatever, I'm making this all up, do something, go here, and we're going to help you get on the pathway, figure out what you want to do, what you're good at, and where you can go. And there's a whole bunch of things that need to happen to do better work there in communications. So that's an area where if an entrepreneurial group was interested in solving for the communications challenge, let's talk about how do we work more with the people we're trying to support collaboratively so that we're communicating effectively to pull them into this opportunity pipeline. That's just an example. If you wanted to look at coaching and human supports, there's a lot of effort being done now to look at what is the role of coaching or mentorship in people's progress in life. Typically, we look at that in a K-12 or a higher education institution, but shouldn't everybody have access to that? Except it's expensive. So there's a whole bunch of opportunity right there to say, how can we scale what we're talking about here, coaching, education, guidance? There's a whole realm. And I don't see these as, they're independent things that people need on a learner journey, but they can be interconnected with that whole journey, so that it doesn't become just a band-aid in an isolated application over here. It can be systemic if we look at the whole picture and solve for particular problems along that journey with other stakeholders. We can knit it together, which will make it better for people. Does that make sense? So it's like we have to disrupt on the outside, because it's too hard for traditional providers to like completely reinvent in their own zone. You've got to like reach out, and then we have to look at ways we can systematize this change, or else it's going to be isolated, isolated pieces. Anyway, these are the things I think about.
It's very, very aligned with what we've been talking about in other situations, about looking at it instead of spot applications or verticals, right? Like we have these value chains.
Yep.
There's a value chain of education. There's a value chain of health. We won one of our programs back in August of last year. We talked about the value chain of around refugees, right? Like if you can actually affect that whole path and create an architecture to plug in, a bunch of smaller startups can plug into that architecture. That's kind of the promise of what we see with Web 3.0, or also distributed autonomous organizations, or crypto tokens that can be plugged into, so that the technologies are coming. And part of what we need to do is make sure that we have one of those type of programs where we start addressing that, and invite all y'all back, whether you're thinking about healthcare or thinking about education or some other value chain that needs to be disrupted, right? Education is certainly one of them. And it's interesting that the number of people that don't have equitable access to some of the most basic things, whether they're in this country or somewhere here in the U.S. or somewhere else in the world. So,
absolutely.
Because they just don't know it exists.
I'm just
Just don't know it exists. That's all. It's like these opportunities that they have during the education programs, they just don't know they're out there.
Well, so let me do this. I think we're right at the end of our time together. Stephen, Holly, is there anything y'all like to say as a wrap on today's, I mean, maybe an advertisement for the EdTech channel in Slack about what's happening there, some interactions and stuff like that? I know we have a handful of subscribers. I'm really surprised we didn't have Greg Hein from Fidelium Tech today, because he should be in this conversation as well. But anything we should say to the about advertising for the channel, and then Holly, anything you'd like to say in wrapping up?
I'd like to first thank Holly for coming on today too. Really appreciate it, and it was very informative, and love the energy. And there's a lot of change obviously ahead, and a lot of work to be done. So appreciate you coming on today.
So happy. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm just glad that we have a bunch of problem solvers here thinking about important issues and getting creative about how to solve them. So if I can, be a sounding board or whatever, share whatever information I might have, and I'd love to learn from you. So we'll stay in touch about that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that, Holly, thank you for being here. All the way back to when our mutual friend introduced us, and the exciting stuff you're doing on driving change in education. I'm excited to have you in the community. Stephen, excited to see your startup grow, and also the EdTech channel start to take some really solid shape on that. For those of y'all that hear this as on the LinkedIn, either on LinkedIn or here, make sure that you get involved in the EdTech channel. That's one of the ways of getting a hold of Steve and getting a hold of Holly, is being in that sub community and the larger community of entrepreneurs around Tech Ranch. Take advantage of that for sure. And with that, I did share Holly's LinkedIn. So if you want more information about her or to connect with her, make sure that you use that, unless there's any other particular way that either of y'all would like to make sure that you're plugged into. But what we'll do for wrapping up today is I will take it back, and one thing came in right when I made the question earlier about what's happening with Ukraine. One of my friends saw our post and said that the uacrisis.org, this is the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center that's been put together, that can give you a little bit more about what's happening with Ukraine. So that was pretty fast feedback. If there's other things that you guys suggest, please let us know. Jello, make sure you put a link to this in the show notes for today. And their Twitter ID is Ukraine_world. So we'll keep an eye on that. And I do think that we're going to start a channel area just to see what we can do in response to that, given just the large number of people that at least if nothing else, I know that are concerned about it. If you're not on our email list, if you're not in our community and you want to get involved, the one clearinghouse URL to do that at is techranch.com/connect. A lot of times, especially some of my friends are like, hey, you didn't tell me about blah, blah, blah. Well, we're just about to start ramping up a much more dedicated process of newsletters and other media, social media process. And the easiest way of getting on that information is just make sure you're signed up, make sure you're in the right community and stuff like that. So, Holly, again, thank you for coming today, and I'm excited about. I was excited about that conversation we had, just a few days ago, and now that you're here in the community, and to see the effect that you're already having on the startups that are here, the entrepreneurs that are here. Thank you for being a part of this. Stephen, keep the EdTech channel going, and let us know what you need for building it out. And with that, let's it's always an honor to be a part of working with entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values for changing the world for the better. Let's go change the world for the better together. Thank y'all, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.